I'm Jeff Benton. I'm a solutions architect with One Technology. I'm a F5 guy by trade for years and years. Usually I'd love to give this kind of talk, but we've got some experts that I'll introduce here in a second. But good to see so many familiar faces, some new faces, and really appreciate everyone taking some time to drink some whiskey, eat some ice cream, and talk about a cool solution that we've really come to like. So. As we've worked with a lot of customers on this transformation from more of a traditional infrastructure into more automation, more containerization, DevOps type practices, one of the things we've seen folks struggle with quite a bit is staying on top of security requirements, ensuring that that we've got developers empowered to do all the cool stuff that this technology allows them to do, but not losing track of our requirements for integrity of the environment, safety of the data, all of that kind of stuff. So this the architecture that Todd and Dan are going to present on is kind of a marriage of two technologies that give you that layered approach in a fairly simple architecture, and it's the reason we really like it, giving you that traditional perimeter controls as well as some cool integrations with Kubernetes and containerizations, and then really securing the container environment. So really just holistic end to end, and very simple to implement, whether you're doing it in an on-prem data center, in the cloud, or with a hybrid cloud deployment. So just a real quick note before I hand it over to the guys. We're going to do a bit of a panel discussion at the end of their presentation. So if you've got questions that you come up with along the way, I'd be happy to collect those in the chat. And we've got everyone promoted to panelists, so we could also potentially take them on the voice bridge if you feel more comfortable with that. But I will just kind of look through those and either read them off or let you guys do that. Your call there. But with no further ado, since I know we stand between everyone and the whiskey at this point, I'll introduce Todd Namba from F5 Solutions Architect, and Dan Schwartz from SysDig Solutions Architect, or Sales Engineer, I believe is your title. But
I mean, solutions architect sounds great, man. Anything with architect, you're supposed to make more money, right?
It sounds way smarter without the sales part in there, but
yeah, I know. But
whatever you
sometimes just got to take your title and just live with it. It's fine.
But so Todd, Dan, appreciate you guys taking the time. Todd, I'll pass it over to you to get us kicked off.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. So this picture that you're seeing is just to kind of give us a level set of what we're going to talk about today, where F5 fits, where SysDig fits, and the kind of things that we're going to mitigate. So as you can see, F5 is out on the edge. We're the edge security piece in this story. It's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? Peanut butter is awesome by itself, but when you layer on jelly and some artisan bread on top of that, it just takes it up another level, right? So the layered approach, same thing, works with security. The more layers and stuff that you can have to protect an application, the better, right? And it's because you have these hackers out there, right? These guys have been growing up playing Super Mario Brothers. They're figuring out all these different ways to get an application through tunnels, over valleys, jumping over valleys, whatever. They really want to get to that end game, right? Saving that princess or getting to the data, whatever. They'll do whatever it takes to get to that point. But instead of just winning the game, right, there's monetary value at the end of that game that they're playing, and it's very lucrative. So that's just kind of the edge piece. Dan, I don't know if you want to go into the container piece now a little bit, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into the next slides. Also, one thing I wanted to point out before I hand it over to Dan is the CIS, this thing in between the edge security and your container environments. For those of you who are familiar with container environments, right, that's a very dynamic environment. So to pair that with a proxy, which is really required in a Kubernetes container environment, we are aware of the different containers that are being spun up, spun down, and we intelligently hook into Kubernetes and become that container ingress and automatically populating our load balancing pools from what Kubernetes is spinning up and spinning down. So it makes that entry into the container world that much easier.
Yeah, thanks. The only thing I'll add before we dig into it, right? So as traffic, as you're controlling behavior around your web application, whatever that app is doing, there's a lot that goes on underneath the covers with a containerized environment. So what we'll talk about here in a little bit is securing all the way down to a process level, but also we want to talk about kind of the action and activity that's happening around your container environment, because that's just as critical as far as controlling who can get at the application. You want to be providing access to what you want, and then not hoping that some bad actor doesn't find your app or that endpoint. So we'll talk about that. That's why all those clouds are kind of listed over there on the providers are listed to the right, because SysDig actually helps provide security and event tracking through the rest of the infrastructure. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, with that, we can move on.
All right, so continuing that conversation about edge security. This is depicting one of our customers' network traffic, right? So this is traffic that's ingressing into an application. What we saw once they placed F5 in front of this is that all this traffic that they were seeing was not real user traffic, right? This is all this red stuff are what we call bots. And by our definition, right, that is automated traffic. So hackers are using these bots to do reconnaissance on your application, like what kind of things you're using, what ports are open. And this is done just all automated, right? They click a button, they point you to a URL, and it starts to gather all this information and give them ways of how they can attack your web application. So what F5 can do is it can differentiate between a human behind a browser and this automated traffic. And this has so many benefits, right? We're not only keeping out the bad guys, but indirectly, we're giving you clean traffic that your application can process. So if you can think of how this indirectly benefits you, right? Just think of the number of logs that would not be generated if this automated traffic was filtered out. Or think about how much you pay, right? If you have your application that's hosted in the cloud, think of all the response traffic, right? You're paying for the throughput that's egressing that cloud. Think of all the response traffic that this is filtering out that you don't have to pay for. So us being able to identify bots, block the bad and malicious ones, and only give you the clean traffic is a huge benefit for protecting that edge. So once we do have that clean traffic, right, and people are using your application the way that it's supposed to, we have our WAF, our web application firewall. So this is once that user's in your application and it's using it, we're making sure that they're adhering to the standards out there, right? So we're protecting against the OWASP top 10, so the SQL injections, the buffer overflows, things like that. We're protecting assets behind the F5 that inevitably come up with CVEs. So, right, Apache web servers, IIS web servers. Instead of having to immediately fix those things on the back end, a web application firewall can protect you until you get to the time that you can patch those back-end services. Even the vulnerabilities, right? Some stuff that, the 0 days stuff that have just been published, a lot of times our protections can protect against that because we're doing more of a positive security model, right? We're only allowing what you want to allow to happen with your web application, and everything else is being blocked. All right. Any questions, comments? Okay, let me hand it over to Daniel.
Cool, thank you. So kind of following along the life cycle of traffic coming to and fro between your app and the rest of the world, there's a few places that, from a SysDig perspective, what we're trying to get our customers to a posture of compliance, whatever that means to you. There are dozens of frameworks, and if you're beholden to specific compliance requirements like PCI or SOC, or if you're just implementing frameworks like NIST, all of that, it kind of goes through the whole spectrum. It's not just connectivity, it's understanding, right, what's your CVE. Todd mentioned CVEs. So containers, just like a normal server that we've been dealing with for forever, they need to be scanned. But you're not just scanning for vulnerabilities, you're scanning for best practices. So things like what ports are open, potentially finding things like malware, all of those types of things you want to be scanning way early on. If you're familiar, there's this term floating around. It's like buzzword bingo all the time, right? But this whole shift left mentality just means get security closer to the people that actually create these applications, so that there's not a whole bunch of rinse and repeat. As applications are developed and updated, as they get pushed into production, all of the security stuff should have already happened as much as possible. Things like scanning and best practices should have been validated. So by the time it hits a production environment, you're ready to go, and there's no rework that has to be done. So that's kind of that upper left-hand corner, is basically securing closer to the build time. Closer in the upper right-hand corner there, cloud compliance, or just continuous compliance, is really just constantly running best practice checks against your cloud infrastructure. So are your S3 buckets configured correctly? Are your, are you configured to have people use multi-factor authentication? All of those kind of configuration best practices. I don't know the spectrum of people, but there's a lot of moving parts with cloud configurations. So, all the IAM settings, all of that stuff, we're constantly checking hundreds and hundreds of best practices, and then we present that to you for your entire tenant, different regions, just to make sure that things are, configured the way that you want them to be, and not accidentally or maliciously misconfigured. So that's the upper right-hand corner. So the way I usually talk about it is those two top boxes. That's kind of like locking the front door on your house, right? These are things you need to do. If you're not doing them, you potentially maybe being careless, or maybe you're just immature in your development life cycle. Whatever it is, those are things that we would all agree you should probably be looking at. Now, beyond that, those lower two boxes are, hey, we did everything that we know how to do, but there's still ways that these hackers and people that write malware or ransomware, they are very elegant nowadays, and they will get in, and you need to understand, how do I detect what they're doing when they're doing it, and then that's kind of that lower right-hand corner is detection. So network detection. Did someone fire up a weird process inside of my container? All of this really granular detail is about runtime detection. And then forensics, that incident responses, when you're talking with compliance, reports and insurance companies and all of these stuff, a forensic asset is actually something that they will ask for, right? They want to know, how did they get in? Who was it? What was things like source IP addresses? What did they touch? What did they run a script? What did that script do? So that forensic kind of asset is something that we can create on the fly. And the really important thing about all of this is just the nature of containers. They come and go within a matter of seconds sometimes. So being able to do all this, you have to understand how what that nature is. How do I detect all that stuff as it's happening on the fly across thousands of nodes potentially? So that's kind of, those are the kind of the key use cases around compliance and security that SysDig provides. So I'll pause there. Any questions about that or comments or snide remarks? That's fine too. You guys are getting ready to drink whiskey, so you might as well just get the party started. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so last slide, guys, and then we can have at it. But really, all this slide is saying is on the left there is kind of all of the pieces, parts inside of your cloud tenant, and it, whether it be AWS, Azure, whatever it is, there's a lot of moving pieces. And the other thing I would say is most customers that I talk to are not just using one cloud, right? So they have a little bit in AWS, they have a little bit in Azure, they have some on-prem like private cloud stuff. And from a tooling point of view, when you have all of those different solutions, they're all going to provide different tooling for security monitoring and the like. So where SysDig really helps is giving you in the center there just a common policy language to basically declare how you want all that stuff to behave. So one engine that understands all of the pieces, parts that go along with cloud infrastructure or private cloud infrastructure, but still one place where you create one policy and then you attach that to the various environments, and then creating a common event stream all the way from potentially your cloud environment down, all the way down to a container and its behavior. So really creating that continuum for compliance. There's a lot of moving parts. So that's kind of where SysDig sits in the middle and kind of coordinates all that communication and then presents it in a meaningful way. And that's all I got.
Yeah, so that's very good, right? So this is the kind of layered security that we're talking about, where F5 can help protect against that the bad things out on the internet from getting into your containers and doing malicious things. So again, that layered approach.
Hey, well, thanks, Todd. Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate that. I'll just kind of add in that, from the customers I've seen using this, and I really hope I don't run afoul of any app developers who might be on the call, but this really allows app teams to do all the stuff they're reading about and trying to push from the perspective of agile development processes, right? But it allows the infrastructure and security teams to provide those guardrails so that you can maintain the control that you need to, keep things secure and let them do the rapidly changing, rapidly deploying processes with CI/CD. So really cool solution. And, appreciate you guys going through it. Got just a couple questions here. I don't know how we're doing on time, but I think we probably got time for one or two.
We're good, Jeff. I let them know that we got a little bit of late start, so we're good.
Perfect. Thanks, Catlin.
We probably need 3 minutes for people to run to their freezer. So I think you have probably 10 from.
All right, we'll do two questions here. I've got two already teed up. So and this one might be more for Dan, but this one is basically about the promise of containers. They're asking if containers are more secure by nature, they're kind of sold as this way to isolate and kind of segregate already. And so why would we need additional tools to help secure containers when they're supposed to be secure?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there is, so the first thing I would say is containers are absolutely more secure, just because of their nature, because of that ephemeral nature, because you're so specific with the port potentially and the process that is actually going to serve data to a customer. The attack that plane is very, very small, but the reality remains that even if a container is there for 5 seconds, programmatically, the way that hackers and malware and ransomware work, 5 seconds is still an eternity. So as these attack approaches continue to get more and more elegant, and people, I will tell you, even hackers, they're still learning cloud infrastructure. crazy. But as they can become more and more familiar, and as more companies are venturing into production workloads in cloud, the pot, it's like a honey pot. The sweeter it is, the more elegant they'll become. So containers are more secure by default, but as you get into the elegance of attacks and the ephemeral nature, that's why additional tooling is necessary, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does, because I talked for a really long time.
Thanks, Dan. One other question here that I've got looks like more of an F5 question, so probably for you, Todd. But what is the need for web application firewall when we've got next-gen firewalls already doing that sort of functionality?
Well, they're not. So I do get that question a lot, right? We have a next-gen firewall. It's application aware. They build it up as this Parthenon of a solution, right, to protect everything. But when it comes to web applications, there's like so much more. If you were to look at the traffic that's going through a next-gen firewall that is application aware, you'll see logs that say TCP port 80 or port 443, web browsing or web application or something like that, and that's it, right? So you get that visibility that this traffic is related to web browsing or a web application, but it has no context and no visibility of how those people are using the application, right? Are they putting in million bit strings into like an address field, or are they hitting like a heavy URL, like looking for stores around the world instead of just in its simple area? So the WAF is made for web applications, right? It's made to dig into the every page of the web application, protect specific like fields and parameters. So it is just the right tool to protect a web application. And so, in a lot of the customers that I deal with, right, WAF is it's like green eggs and ham. They don't want to have any part of it. It's hard to do. It's something that we don't really know or understand. But once they try it out, once they get a taste and see the visibility, the control, all those things that you can do with the WAF, they'll eat it all day long, right? Cloud, on-premise, SaaS, it doesn't matter. It's a really good tool.
Thanks, Todd. And got one last question in the chat, and then maybe we'll open it up to anyone else. But I had a question. How does SysDig differ from Red Hat Quay?
So SysDig would actually kind of come alongside Quay. So Quay as a repository, right? So we can scan images that are stored out there. If you're using Quay and some of its security features, that's fine. When it really gets to the meat of the conversation is once an image moves away from Quay, out of the repo into a runtime environment, that's kind of where SysDig will thrive. Also, moving from Quay into like a build environment, a lot can change in an image between where it's stored, goes through a dev environment into production. We'd be tracking all of that behavior from storage through dev into production.
Great, thank you, Dan. So that's all I had in the chat, but I think we probably got 1 or 2 minutes. If anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question on the bridge, feel free. Otherwise, we'll hopefully get to whiskey here in a second. Going once, going twice.
Everyone's like, give me whiskey, let's go.
Yeah, give me whiskey. That's right. That's what I was thinking.
Sarah asked a question in the chat. It was a quick poll of how many people are using containers. A few people answered. A couple of Cat Barsteads answered. Thanks, Cat. That's great. I mean, I think we're seeing this a lot, that container adoption is typically starting in a dev environment and starting within most organizations fairly slowly. I also see that there's quite a few SLED State local, for those of you that don't know what that means, local and education accounts on here. I guess, Todd, Jeff, Daniel, what advice would you give for those organizations that are just sort of dabble in containers, maybe only in the development environment? Need this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw my 2 cents out there. I think that, so containers and just that development approach are definitely a different philosophy. There are enormous benefits just from a Kubernetes world and its ability to self-heal and take away a lot of the day-to-day management, going from, you know, a server mindset to a container mindset. They really are intended to die. I mean, they are designed to serve something, provide a service, and then everything else behind the covers doesn't matter anymore. So it really begins breaking apart that dependency on infrastructure. Don't get me wrong, the infrastructure is still there. It's just not so closely tied to the application. So security as well as functional deployment modeling, getting an application from scratch to providing services. There are a lot of benefits, but it is a completely different philosophy. It takes time. There's a, from a talent pool, finding developers that develop that way, but we're really seeing a significant upswing in that space, which is great for SysDig. And I would also say this whole COVID thing, I think, accelerated that behavior. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts. I don't know, Sarah, or if anyone else wants to chime in.
I could throw in just my 2 cents there, and I'll even come at it maybe from kind of the opposite direction a little bit, Dan. I think I oftentimes see customers try to make the transition 100% culturally and everything before they make that leap into their first containerized app. And a lot of that's great, but you don't have to have full infrastructure as code. You don't have to have all of these pieces, and a tool like F5 is great to really help with that transition because it keeps some of those controls there that you're used to and allows you to ease into a container environment. But you can run pretty much anything in a container. You can start implementing containers without having every box checked. And the customers that are really using it, are really happy with it, that I see, are the ones who just sort of took the leap on a small piece of an app or a small app, put it into production, and they've really iterated on that